The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today, author-illustrator Leonard Everett Fisher, is the winner of the 1991 Curlin Award, an annual award given by the Children's Literature Research Collection at the University of Minnesota. Mr. Fisher will be interviewed by Irvy Gilbertson, a Minnesota children's literature expert.
I'm Irvy Gilbertson, and you are Leonard Everett Fisher. We're here this afternoon for an interview with this famous artist, illustrator, and I would like to ask him some questions.
Shoot.
I understand that you have a 50-year anniversary art exhibit coming up in May.
Well, that's correct. I think it better call it a retrospective. At least it's a sampling of work over a 50-year period between 1940 and 1990, and this will be in New York City at the Society of Illustrators Museum of American Illustration, and it opens May 22nd, and it'll run for about a month.
Now, are these all children's illustrations?
No. I think, I'm trying to think of the catalog myself. It's about half and half. A half painting, easel painting, has nothing to do with children's book illustration. Some of it, obviously, children's book illustration. And then there's some other odd lots in there, like some of the postage stamps that I designed that you have mailed without knowing that I had done them. And there's some of those things in there, and one or two posters, but the original art for those posters, not the printed poster.
Okay. I know you best for your children's books. Do you feel that your parents had an influence on you in starting?
Well, I think so, to a certain extent. I like to call myself a third-generation doodler. I had a grandfather, paternal grandfather, that I never knew, who thought he wanted to be an artist and failed at it. And my father had some ideas about being an artist, and he wasn't much good at it either. And so I came along, and I spoiled a painting of his when I was about 2 years old. And they had their Michelangelo right then and there in the spot at the age of 2. And I received my first studio in the front hall closet very quickly thereafter. And so I think, yes, there was parental encouragement, and it just never stopped.
So all of your school years, they encouraged you to draw, to do your...
Well, I don't really think they had to encourage me that much. I think that applause had a lot to do with it. Okay. Aside from parental applause, obviously. Mm-hmm. I was able to get by in school doing drawings, and everybody thought they were wonderful, and I'd get applauded for this. I remember one of my drawings of a pilgrim shooting a turkey was submitted to an all New York City competition for school children, and it won a prize. I was 7 years old. Hmm. And I knew I was off and running right then and there.
So you had talent?
Well, if you say so. I like to think that I have certain skills mm-hmm. that I was born with. I think a lot of people are born with certain kinds of skills. I think coordination, physical coordination, has a lot to do with this, like the same as it would be in athletics. Mm-hmm. But then I think that you're focused and pointed in a particular direction, and it comes out like this.
I see. When you were young, did you do scratchboard art, or did you do watercolors?
Most of the things I did when I was very young had to do with drawings of different kinds. I really didn't begin painting pictures until I was about 14 years old. When I was 13, my parents gave me a paint box, and fully expecting me to do something with that paint box. But that paint box sat on my desk in my room like an altarpiece. And I just stared at it. It was open all the time. I just stared at all the tubes of paint in there and couldn't bring myself to do anything with it. I don't know whether it intimidated me. Also, I don't know whether, perhaps I didn't have anything to say. Eventually, I began painting when I was about maybe 13 and a half, 14 years old. But everything up until that point, I was in professional school when I was 8 at the Heckscher Foundation in the city, in New York City. It was all drawing.
You've done a variety of themes. Where do you get your ideas? That's always a question that everyone wants to know.
Everybody wants to know that, you know. And I'd have to go back in time a little bit. I think it all began, first of all, when people say to me, where do you get your ideas from? And I really can't answer them quickly enough. And I say 2 loose wires or cosmic bombardment, you know, something like this. But I think that it goes back to very early childhood. My mother, there were always books around the house, but my mother used to read to me. But I think it is what she read to me. To prepare me for first grade, for example, they bought a Compton's Picture Encyclopedia. And my mother read to me at bedtime every article in all 26 volumes from A to Z in alphabetical order. And some of them were read over again. By the time I was in first grade, I knew I had a lot of miscellaneous information. They couldn't shut me up, you know, in first grade, but I could also read a little bit. Not fully, but I could read a little bit. And I think by being acquainted with all of the nonfiction, for example, that was in that Compton's Picture Encyclopedia, it must have made a marked impression on me somewhere. And then it began surfacing when I began doing nonfiction in books, and I became interested in a variety of things. I was always interested in a variety of things.
So is that where you get your ideas? You follow the interest that you have?
Oh yeah, I follow my own muse, I think. I perhaps am struck by something. I may pass this before my agent. I'll talk it over with my wife. Talk it over with the publisher. Sometimes the publisher comes up with an idea. It's a mixture of things. But I'll always do what interests me the most and that I'm most comfortable with. And that's a variety of things.
And some of your paintings are color and some of them are black and white?
For books.
For books. Well,
for books. All the painting that I do, so-called easel painting, paintings that have nothing to do with literature as such. These are all color, all in color. The things that I do for books, for example, since 1980, I've painted between 400 and 500 pictures for picture books. Some of these are in black and white. The paint is black and white. But that's for a particular reason.
Yes.
You know.
Well, why do you choose? How do you choose which one you want black and white and which one you would prefer color?
I think where you're moving toward drama, where I'm moving toward drama, and monumentality and power, like Prince Henry the Navigator, this would move me in the direction of black and white. I couldn't conceive of doing the Great Wall of China in color. The whole country's gray, you know. And in doing a book like The 7 Days of Creation, or doing some of the poetry, Sky Songs, written by Myra Cohen Livingston, I couldn't conceive of doing those in black and white. The imagery cried out for color. So there I was, doing color.
Now, I've heard people say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but you also write.
Yes.
Is there some time that the words better express the illustration or the image than the pictures do?
I don't really know if I can give you a direct answer about that. My heart tells me that a picture is worth 1,000 words, because I'm an artist who writes. I do not consider myself a writer. I happen to write because there are certain things that I want to say in books that I cannot say, I want to say with words that I cannot say with pictures. Yes, that's true. I'm not interested in doing paintings of railroads, but I'm interested in describing the movement of a railroad. And this I would do with words rather than with pictures. I would choose other material for picture making.
How do you decide?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think that I think my paintings are more autobiographical. Now, I'm talking about easel paintings now. I'm not talking about illustrations for books. I think that they are in a world all unto themselves. They don't exist on this planet. Whereas doing a book about railroads, which is a matter of realism, simply I would never consider doing that in a painting. I draw that line right there.
Well, now when you write, do you write in longhand?
No, I use a computer, a word processor. And I find it very convenient and very character building and mind improving, and it does improve my writing, I think, for me personally.
Do you print out each draft, or do you just change it on the computer as you go?
I change it on the computer. I will, after doing it, maybe, let's say if I'm working on a 35-page manuscript, I might print out the first 5 or 6 pages to see what it's going to look like, just to read it on a page, because that's how you're going to read it. That's how the youngster is going to read it. They're going to read it on a piece of paper. They're not going to read it off my screen. And it does look different, but I don't print out every sheet as I go along, no.
One of the concerns has been that there will not be any original manuscripts any longer as people begin to use the computer.
Well, I do turn in an original manuscript. I print it on my image writer too. And it comes off as a viable manuscript, and that's what I send to the publisher.
And then do you do any of your illustrations on the computer?
No. I do have that capability, and I do have the software and the necessaries, but I am strictly a painter, and I guess I come out of a different tradition. I think perhaps, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, that if I were 30 years younger now, I probably would be creating images off the computer. I think any young person today in the arts who is not computer literate will be missing something.
Do you think a young person today could create an image off of the computer and not be able to really paint? Possible.
You know, a painting is the creation of an image on a flat surface, using pigment on a flat surface. The conveyance is the brush and the liquid and the paint. Well, the computer, almost like the camera, is another tool to create a different kind of image. Where did we go after clay tablets? We went to papyrus. From papyrus, we had movable type. And I'm missing a few things in between. But we never stayed with the clay tablet. So why should we stay with paint? But I'm a painter, and I will go down to the wire as a painter, even if there are no painters left in the world, because that's me.
Now, to do nonfiction, it's necessary to have good research and accurate facts.
Yes.
How do you do your research?
Well, of course, you have to form a bibliography. You have to do some reading. And I often wondered about that because I used to teach, and I taught youngsters at the college level courses in illustration. And I ran into a number of them that couldn't read, and I couldn't understand literally how they expected to illustrate anything if they couldn't read. How are they going to research anything? I'll give you a typical example of research. Take a book called The White House, which I did recently. We went to Washington. We haunted the National Archives, Library of Congress. We looked at prime source material, photographs, spent a day and a half in the White House. And there was a lot of note-taking and gathering of information in that way, yeah. And I don't think that gathering research is something that starts in a given point and ends at a given point. For me, and all the books that I do, it's an ongoing thing. I'm always collecting information. Either I'm collecting it in my head or I'm putting it in a file somewhere. So eventually, I may never use some of it, but eventually, as a book comes along, like The White House, there would have already been a file created somewhere along the line, maybe even 10 years ago, on that kind of information.
So do you decide when you have enough information to do a book, or do you just think, well, I would like to do this book, and then you get more information?
No, it has nothing to do with how much information I have. I have no idea how much information I need. What interests me is the concept. Do I want to do a book about the White House, the history of the architecture, which is what this is? And I say to myself, yes, I'd like to do this. And then I worry about the research and what's available and what's around and what I have done and what I haven't done, and pursue it from that point.
Do you find that you are working on more than one book at a time?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Just recently, I've been working on and been finishing as I go along now a book about railroads. It's a remake of a book. I rewrote a manuscript. I'm doing an original work on Galileo. And I just finished a picture book dealing with a frog who loses his place in the pond. And all these went on together. And there are other ideas that are going on and concepts that I'm considering. Either I have a list of them, or they're in my head, or they've been rattling around here for 25 years. There are things inside aching to get out that have been there a long, long time. Sometimes they never get out. Sometimes, for some reason, they surface, and you know you're ready to do it.
How do you keep them separate when you're doing more than one book at a time?
I don't know. I don't know how I do that. People say I'm organized, and people say I should teach a course at the Harvard School of Business. You know, I don't know how I organize. I am organized, but I have not created some kind of file that tells me how to organize. It's just a natural bent that I have for this.
Do you have a place to create?
I have a studio. Oh, yes. And everything has a place in that studio. And if things get a little bit out of line in there, it has to be put back. And the studio is carpeted, which is unlike any art studio you probably ever run into. Most studios of artists are paint spattered. You know, that's the romantic look of it. Mine's carpeted because we had a concrete floor and my feet got cold, so we carpeted it. It was that simple.
Do you think it would help children if they had a place to create, or can you create any place?
I don't think a place to create has anything to do with creativity. I think the place to create is your mind, and it doesn't matter where you are. Looking at it in another way, I think that you may need some inspiration. Something may trigger something. So it'd be nice if you sat on a rock in front of the ocean and were inspired by the waves that were approaching you. But your mind is really your studio.
And then you gather materials to put in your studio?
No, I don't follow you on that one.
Well, if your mind is your studio, but then you have a place to create, so you
I have
gather.
a special room, and it has a lot of glass. It's 25 feet length of glass. It rises 14 feet. There's a lot of light that comes in there. And there are file cabinets, and there is an arrangement of desks. There's a soft chair to sit on, and there's an easel at one end of it. There are two walls. It's painted everything completely white in there. Two of the walls at one end contain my paintings. There are bookshelves. There's a wall of photographs, memorabilia, and things of that sort. So it's an office for one.
Okay. Your Oregon Trail is kind of a photo essay.
Yes.
Now, where did you get your photos?
Yeah, that's another thing. You know, I didn't answer the question fully the last time. Of course, you can start with the Library of Congress, which has photos on everything, or the National Archives. But we approached the Oregon Historical Society.
Okay.
We also approached the Historical Society of the state of Montana. What we did was to follow the Oregon Trail to see what states it went through. Those states did not exist at that time. They were just territories, but they are states now, and all 50 states have historical societies. And that's where you begin.
That's where you start with your information.
And they tell us what they have and what they do not have. Now, in the book on railroads, for example, we are approaching the New York Central lines. We're approaching the Pennsylvania Railroad and Amtrak and all this to find out what photographs are possible. Also, the New York Historical Society and the building of Grand Central Station. All this material is there. All there. Books like Ellis Island, for example. Most of the photographs there came from the Museum of Immigration, which is on Liberty Island, where the Statue of Liberty is. And Also the New York Historical Society, the New York Public Library, again, the Library of Congress, National Archives.
How do you must have more information than you need.
You always do.
Then how do you cut down and decide what is important to put in the book?
You write the manuscript. What's important is the idea and how you address that idea. What is the focus of the book? And once you have to write first, and you have to complete that manuscript, and then the manuscript will tell you what kind of support material is necessary to make it more alive pictorially.
So you do not illustrate first and then add the words?
Absolutely not. The only time, and I was telling you at lunch today, I remember, the only book that I can remember where I did the illustrations first and the text came later was just finished. And it'll be published in the fall. It's called Sailboat Lost. And I did it as a wordless picture book. And then the publisher got a little skeptical and said, maybe we ought to have a text for this. So I wrote a little poem, which appears in the front of the book, but not on any page in the book. And the poem is a 13-line poem that deals with the 13 the double spreads that appear in the book, the 13 illustrations that appear in the book. Mm-hmm. But the pictures came first. I don't know if I'll ever do that again.
How do you decide how long a book should be?
Well, that's part of the specifications that the publisher decides. It has to do with budget, it has to do with market. I don't decide that. That's decided by the production departments of the publishing houses primarily.
But wouldn't that affect how much material you put into the book?
It certainly does. It certainly does. It will increase or decrease the manuscript. On these photographic essays, we decided that we would like to have at least almost half of the book in photographs. So that means that you're going to have less of a manuscript. Sure, it has a great deal to say about the price of the book, mm-hmm. as to how large the bulk of that book is, even as to the quality of the paper.
Well, before you begin writing, then, do you know how big the book is going to be?
Yes. That could change, though. In the creative aspect of the creative business world, things have a way of changing. You may decide you're going to do a 64-page book, like we did with the White House, and it ended up 96 pages.
And then
So
what do you do? Go to the editor and say, I have this?
Oh, yeah, I'd say, we have a larger manuscript here. What should we do about this? Well, then they have to go back to their accounting staff, to the bookkeeping staff, and do a cost overrun again to see what this book is going to cost them. Because when you add the 34 pages or whatever it is to this, it's going to cost them more money.
Do they ever tell you, no, you can't go
Yes.
that long? And
They
then what
certainly do.
Then what do you have? You just have to cut it back?
You have to understand that this is art by committee, art by restriction, art by budget, art dictated by the marketplace. The whole idea here is to be creatively overwhelming so that you can leapfrog and transcend all of those restrictions and limitations. After all, when Michelangelo did the Sistine ceiling, the ceiling was only so large. He couldn't paint off it.
No.
He would have been painting in the air. So we all have restrictions of some kind. And in publishing, the restrictions are laid down by the production departments of the houses themselves. And I abide by them. I don't find them restrictive in any way. I might, question them sometimes. I might feel I could do a better job. But I think of all the books I've done, I think I could have done a better job in every book I've ever done.
You have a new book, the ABC exhibit,
Yes.
which is in full color and is very accessible to children. Are you going to be doing more full color books now?
Well, yes, I have been all along. Well, let's say for the past 10 years. And I think certain things have happened in the industry that make it possible for me to do this. I don't have to color separate. In other words, do each color separately on a sheet of acetate and go through that kind of process. Everything is laser scanned now. It is accessible to production costs. It makes things easier for us all around. I'm a painter. I started life that way, and I'm going to end it that way. And yes, you will see more of these from me.
Well, I thank you very much for being here this afternoon and allowing us this time to interview you. I'm sure this will be very profitable for a lot of children and adults that see it.
Well, thank you, Irvy. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Leonard Everett Fisher and Irvy Gilbertson. Marlon Schrouth is a member of the Friends of the Curlin Collection. She was instrumental in helping arrange Mr. Fisher's visit with us today, and we do appreciate that. Marlon is also the school librarian at Saint Alphonsus School in Brooklyn Center. She's instilled a great love of children's books with the students in the school, and she's also been instrumental in promoting children's literature with librarians and educators across the state. Marlon and classroom teacher Maureen Lefevre have been working with 7th and 8th graders at Saint Alphonsus School to develop a series of skits bringing children's books alive. The students presented these skits recently to younger children at Saint Alphonsus School. Here are some examples.
The Five Chinese Brothers. Playing narrator, impressionist, and narrator of the year, Mark DeVille. Playing two Chinese brothers, Tony, I, and Ricky. Playing three Chinese brothers, Charlie Sowicki. Sit back and enjoy the show.
He looked very closely. Something had been erased. There was an F, and an R, and an A. Francine? The next day, Arthur had a plan. Should we read Follow My Leader? No! A penny a look! Yeah! This is my favorite story because some of my most best friends are in this story. I'm going to introduce them to you. Lawrence! Lawrence, can you come out? Hi, Gus. Are you nervous, Lawrence? No. Why is your hand shaking? On Thursday, when Imogene woke up, she found she had grown antlers. Getting dressed was difficult. And getting through the door now took some thinking. Imogene started down for breakfast, but got hung up. Oh, Imogene's mother fainted away.
Sure, said Arthur. I can't wait.
Wow! Francine spin the bottle game!
Happy birthday, Arthur!
And that concludes our story, Arthur's Birthday by Mark Brown. We hope you enjoyed it. And just remember, you're never too old to throw a party. The attic was dark. Was the witch brave? Would she go inside? Yes, she squinted. And what did she see? A whole flock of bats hanging from the rafters. Oh, fine, she grumbled. Which one is mine? She called out. Hat, come down.
Thanks to all the 7th and 8th grade students at Saint Alphonsus School and to Marlon Schrouth and Maureen Lefevre. Thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.